So it's been a little while since I've done a bike walk around, mostly just because they've been all pretty vanilla. As are actually these two. There's really not a whole lot to say about them, but the couple of things I wanted to mention were about buying used bikes. So a lot of times you'll see really, really cheap bikes come up. And if you're a parts guy, that's excellent, right? But if you're used to working on bikes and you kind of know what you're getting into. But a lot of times you also end up with something that'll be well over your skill set. Because kind of the problem with a lot of cheap bikes is if they don't run, you really have no idea what you're getting into. Even if they do run, you still might not have a good idea of what you're getting into. So I kind of wanted to just go over some things with SVs as far as things you should know if you're buying a cheap, beat up, or doesn't start easy fix bike. So this one, for example, at some point it was obviously in an accident. Oh, I'm sure multiple, because it's as you can see with dual plug motor, it's an 07 plus, but it's got 03 tail, and it's got big dent in the tank. Somebody must have had massive balls, or a really hard pelvis, or it was in a world of pain. But here's something to note on this bike. See how there's a crack in the frame? And these are pretty easy to spot if you kind of run a flashlight around. Even on a silver frame, they're pretty easy to spot because they just reflect light different. But this bike is absolutely totaled. Like, there's no situation in the world where rewelding a frame is something that somebody should expect to do. Also, even if you do find somebody who can weld aluminum, to grind that down, etc., you're probably, that's just the symptom. There's probably a lot more tweaked. There's probably a lot more misaligned than you would think. So obviously, crack frame, definite no, because at the very least, even if it runs, even if it's beautiful, if it's got a cracked frame, just, you're at the very least looking at reframing a bike, which is dozens of hours probably. Now, another thing to think about is almost any bike that's ever been hit in almost any way will have tweaked forks. So you're looking at a couple of $100, and I have a video for how to check if forks are straight or not. But even if they're eyeball sort of okay, things like a big dent in the radiator, that's from the wheel. So at some point, something was tweaked to the point where it hit the radiator. Even if the guy replaced the forks, maybe the triples are bent. Forks are a few $100, and you also don't always know what you're getting. Obviously, things like really rusty, like floating pins on the rotor, stuff like that, that just shows you it's sat outside. But also any bent wheel, and I'm not sure if I can show it on this one, but I think I saw some wheel damage on this other one. Any bent wheel, any bend in the wheel usually means that the forks are also tweaked, just because a lot of energy goes all over the place. So something to think about: if a bike's been crashed, if a bike's been looped, you're probably looking at forks. Also, wheels aren't exactly cheap either. You're even just for a straight set of wheels and rotors, you're looking at a couple of $100 probably. Then bodywork, everybody's like, oh yeah, it's just bodywork. Yeah, well, so the problem is that this OEM thing, the front fairing, is in good shape, $300-400. Gas tank, same thing. Oh yeah, it's just got a ding, I'll just get a new tank. Yeah, okay, good luck finding a good one. I mean, I'm always looking, and it's always rare for me to see one that hasn't been fucked with an anchor. So obviously, tail, subframe, stuff like that on this bike isn't isn't unexpected. Obviously, my guess is he looped a wheelie. I don't actually know. I got it from a guy who bought it to do something with and then gave up, which kind of inspired this video. So stuff like that, definitely look out for, just because you think, yeah, that's not a lot of big damage, but it is quite a bit of money. So by the time you bought a $500 bike and bought all the pieces to replace everything that's broken on a $500 bike, you're looking at just good bike money. So why get sweaty in the process? Just buy a good bike to begin with. Now, another thing to always watch out for with buying an SV is rust in the tank. This is probably not going to show up. Yeah, there's no way I can actually get a video of it, but there's plenty of really rusty tanks that I've posted over the years on previous owner and stuff like that. So rusty tank usually means either replacing it or you're looking at some kind of coating or something. But either way, it's kind of a big job, and then chances are you're also killing a pump, which is also like, they're getting kind of rare, so I'd be expecting a couple of $100 or having to do a rebuild. And while quantum rebuilds are pretty good, there's also filter to deal with. There's also potential that the body is just so shot that you might actually need to buy a whole one, and you won't know until you start opening up the bike. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is, obviously, if you know what you're getting into, you're not gonna really be, looking at this video. You're going to be making your own decisions. But the last thing I kind of wanted to mention is there are plenty of ads, and I usually end up buying them if they're cheap enough, but there are plenty of ads out there that are like, just needs battery, just needs carb clean, doesn't start, doesn't run, or will run off a jump. So here's the problem: the just needs batteries, even if you bring a battery with you, if you jumpstart the bike, you really won't know that it has a charging system issue unless you poke around and do the stator test and rectifier test. And I would be very surprised if an owner would let you actually poke at a bike with a multimeter. I mean, maybe the sellers you meet are different than mine, but most people would be like, I don't know about all that. What are you doing to my bike? So something to think about. Obviously, if you can't get it started, you really don't know what's going on. I've actually had bikes that, because I couldn't start them, I basically assumed that there was no motor, and anything that I would get out of a motor would be maybe a couple of parts here and there. But I've had bikes where the cylinders were just rusted solid into the pistons were rusted solid into the cylinders. I've had bikes with missing internal parts, like somehow one of them was missing a I can't remember if it was a clutch basket or a water pump, but there was just like missing parts inside the motor that were then closed up. Super weird. Like somebody went and started to fix it or started to gut it and then just put it back together to sell it. But obviously, those weren't bikes that I paid a lot of money for. Some other things that are kind of expensive to fix or find on an SV. The nice thing is, actually, if you have a blown up motor, replacement motors aren't particularly expensive. You're looking at like $500, $600, $700, which isn't earth-shattering. If you get the thing cheap enough, that might be worthwhile. They're not hard to swap, but there are some things that are kind of not plentiful, like OEM radiators that are straight. They're pretty much non-existent. You can get Chinese ones, but they're hit and miss. Forks, triples, fairings, main fairing stays are surprisingly uncommon in straight condition, like this main bracket. Another thing that's surprisingly uncommon in good condition is an S headlight with all the tabs intact. What ends up happening with these bikes when they crash, they end up breaking the tabs. So you can put it back together with broken tabs, but it won't be super solid. It will kind of shake a little more. Well, this is an extreme example, but with broken tabs, it does get a little shakier. A couple more things that are pricey sometimes, or can get pricey sometimes. The aluminum subframes are actually, I have a ton of steel ones. I have a ton of subframes for 03s, but for some reason, it's not that often anymore that I see like 04 plus aluminum subframes. They're just not there. Bodywork, absolutely. The tails are cheap. The tails are everywhere. The tails are pretty plentiful. But main fairing stays, lower fairings, none of that is cheap. Then things like rear sets, you can just get the Chinese ones, or you can get aftermarket ones, or sometimes you can score OEM sets. But there just often isn't a good, cheap alternative for some parts. So basically the Cliffs Notes are, do the math before for buying up all the parts before buying a bike, and assume that anything that you can't verify by looking at it, or by opening the tank, or by watching the bike run, anything that you can't verify as good is shot. So pretty much, if it looks like this, the forks are shot. If it looks like this, if it's got a dented radiator, this one's good, but I think it was actually, well, it's curved. So if it's curved, it's probably been hit, but it's probably been hit with something. So I think the forks and the triples are probably going to be a little off. And then just kind of look at the overall condition of the bike and think about what the seller is trying to sell you. Like, if you think about, hey, it just needs a battery. Well, dude, you're trying to sell a $2,000 bike or $3,000 bike or whatever. Wouldn't you spend the $50, buy a battery, and pop it in? Chances are, if they don't care that much, they probably also don't. They're either completely inept at maintaining the thing, or have long given up, or it just hasn't run in ages. And then you're looking at stopped bike problems. When they sit for a long time, all sorts of things go bad. Like, things like just need carb clean, maybe. If you can get it to start somehow, if you can get it to run off starter fluid or something, get some kind of juice in there, and see if you get any kind of diagnostics, like just by listening to the motor. Or maybe it won't start because, yeah, the carbs are filthy, but it's also sat for a while, so everything is rusted together. Who knows? But you can't really assume that it's going to be a good bike just based on what the seller is telling you. Like this one, for example. If I were to just buy it assuming it just needs bodywork and then I'm gonna send it, I'd be in for a world of hurt, probably, because yeah, it needs bodywork. It also needs a chain. It also needs controls. It also needs master. It also needs a subframe. It also needs. And you can see how these things would add up. Like, if you think about it, $20 things that this bike needs, and there's easily $20 things that this bike needs, that's still $400. And that's on top of, fairing, tank, stuff that's obvious and a little more money. Another thing to note on fairings, this entire thing, so fairing, headlight, main fairing stay, little side brackets, inner fairing plastics, the triangles, the under fairing, inner fairing plastics, stuff like that. You're easily looking at $500, $600, $800 to replace that with something that's in good shape. So yeah, great. $500 bike. It's gonna cost me thousands to get it back to good. Um, might not be the best idea, right? So that's something to think about. Um, yeah, I'm a little buried today, so I can't even get my truck in here. Somebody just like throwing cars everywhere. Something else to note: this beautiful thing has been sitting in my shop. It's my friend's bike. This thing is absolutely nuts. I don't have a key for it because it's not mine, but look at all this carbon fiber shining everywhere. It's pretty awesome. And then, all sorts of other cool stuff like the Graves full titanium system. That's pretty gnarly. This bike is definitely drool worthy. Maybe I should do a review of it. Maybe I should steal the keys to it and take it for a ride. Somebody let me know if you want me to do a review of this thing. But yeah, anyway, so those are my thoughts on buying janky SSVs and hoping to make something good out of them. If you want more like this, good, let me know in the comments. And of course, I do try to make these videos kind of useful. So if I miss something important, let me know. Maybe I should do a video about it. All the usual YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, all that happy stuff. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it.